Emily Parker sat at the small corner table of her favorite cafe, staring into the swirling patterns of her cappuccino. Rain tapped gently against the window beside her, and outside the city blurred into muted colors under the soft gray sky. She hugged her coat tighter around her shoulders. As if the fabric could shield her from the quiet ache she felt inside, it had been another ordinary week, filled with work emails and half-hearted smiles. And yet Emily carried a persistent, unspoken longing. It wasn't the kind of loneliness that comes from being physically alone. She had friends, family, and coworkers, but a deeper emptiness, a quiet yearning for something that she couldn't quite name. Something or someone who could see the world the way she did and still want to be part of it. Her life was orderly. She liked it that way. She enjoyed the comfort of routine. Morning coffee. The familiar clink of her keyboard at work, walks through the park when the weather permitted. Yet, somewhere beneath the surface, she felt a gentle tug toward a life that felt more vivid, more alive than the careful rhythms she followed. It was a feeling that sometimes made her smile, sometimes made her heart ache. As she sat watching the rain, her eyes caught movement across the street. A man was hurrying along the sidewalk, a briefcase in one hand, his scarf wrapped tightly around his neck. There was something ordinary about him at first glance, but as he paused under the awning of the bakery, shaking off the rain, Emily noticed a quiet vulnerability in his posture, a kind of tired weariness that mirrored her own. Their eyes met for a fleeting second, and she quickly looked away, embarrassed by the sudden awareness of someone else noticing her. Yet the brief connection lingered in her mind. Who was he? Did he carry his own silent stories, perhaps a longing that mirrored her own? Emily shook her head lightly and returned to her coffee. But her heart refused to settle. The door of the cafe jingled, pulling her attention back. A gust of cool air brought in a newcomer, and with it the faint scent of rain and earth. She looked up and froze. It was him. The man from across the street had entered the cafe. He hesitated near the counter, glancing around as if searching for something familiar. Emily's heart beat faster, not with fear, but with a curious, inexplicable hope. There was something magnetic in the way he moved, unassuming yet somehow entirely present, as if he belonged in this world just as much as she did. He ordered his coffee, his voice calm and steady, yet there was a softness to it that made Emily's chest tighten. When he finally turned, scanning for a place to sit, his eyes found hers again. And in that moment, the ordinary cafe felt suspended in time. A silent question passed between them, one that didn't need words. Could this stranger somehow understand the quiet spaces of her heart? Emily felt a blush rise to her cheeks. She told herself to focus on her notebook, scribbling absent-minded thoughts into the margins, but she couldn't help stealing glances at him. There was a gentle kindness in his expression, a sense of someone who had lived through his share of quiet struggles, yet still approached the world with hope. As he moved toward the small table beside hers, Emily's mind raced. Was it coincidence that he had chosen to sit there? Or something else, something unspoken, something she couldn't yet name? She tried to steady her breathing to remind herself that she didn't know him, that strangers rarely entered one's life so precisely at the moment when longing had settled in the heart. And yet, when he finally sat down, a soft smile curling at the corners of his mouth, Emily felt a spark she hadn't felt in years. Not the rush of excitement that came from fleeting thrills, but something steadier, warmer, quietly insistent. It was as if the universe had briefly paused, just long enough for two lives, lonely in different ways, to brush against each other. The rain outside softened into a drizzle, the city's colors blurring into gentle streaks of gold and gray. Emily stirred her coffee, pretending to focus on the foam art, while her heart quietly whispered that something extraordinary was beginning, something that would not let her world remain the same. And in that quiet cafe, among the hum of conversations and the soft clink of cups, two strangers began a story that neither could have predicted. A story that promised hope, a touch of heartbreak, and the gentle magic of a connection, waiting to unfold. But neither of them knew yet just how deeply their lives would intertwine or how profoundly the other would change the way they saw the world. though. Weeks that followed that rainy afternoon at the cafe settled into a rhythm that felt both comforting and unexpected. Emily found herself glancing at the clock a little more often, wondering if today might be the day he would appear again. And more often than not, he did. Daniel Carter had a quiet presence that seemed to fit effortlessly into the spaces of her life. Like a familiar song she had forgotten, but somehow still remembered the melody of Dot. Their first conversations had been cautious, polite greetings that gradually stretched into shared thoughts about the city, favorite books, and even the little joys of a perfectly brewed cup of coffee. Daniel was thoughtful, always listening with a gentle attentiveness that made Emily feel seen in a way she hadn't realized she'd been missing. One crisp Saturday morning, the two found themselves walking through the small park near her apartment. Golden leaves drifted down around them, painting the paths with muted yellows and oranges. Emily wrapped her scarf a little tighter and laughed softly as Daniel pointed out a squirrel balancing precariously on a thin branch. "You'd think it knew something we don't," he said, eyes twinkling the way it moves so carefully. Emily smiled, feeling a warmth bloom in her chest. "Maybe it's just cautious," she said. "Like some of us, trying not to fall in unexpected ways." There was a quiet understanding in that exchange. A subtle acknowledgement of lives lived with care, caution, and the memory of past hurts. Emily had learned to guard her heart, afraid of disappointment and longing. Daniel, too, carried remnants of previous experiences, small disappointments that had taught him patience, empathy, and the value of quiet connections as they strolled along the winding paths. Emily thought about the people she had once let into her life, the friendships that had faded, the feelings she had tucked away. There had been one person long ago who had seemed to understand her completely. Yet circumstances had pulled them apart before anything could truly bloom. Daniel seemed to carry that same bittersweet wisdom, and she realized she was no longer afraid to feel it stir again. Their conversations often drifted to memories of childhood, of dreams once held close and the small victories that life had granted them. Daniel shared stories of his younger years, of quiet afternoons spent reading in the sun, of letters never sent to someone he had once admired. Emily listened, feeling a gentle nostalgia, recognizing in his stories the echoes of her own unspoken thoughts. "I used to write letters I never gave anyone," Daniel admitted one afternoon as they sat on a park bench, watching the sunlight dance through the branches. "Not because I didn't want to share them, but because I wasn't sure anyone would understand." Emily's heart thudded softly. She knew exactly what he meant. "I do that too," she confessed. "Sometimes I think about sending them, but then I don't." That shared silence carried more weight than words. In those quiet moments, their connection deepened. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was the subtle understanding that they had both known longing, heartbreak, and the careful steps of hope. And now, cautiously, their lives were weaving together in ways neither had expected. Yet, even in these tender moments, there were hints of distance, small barriers that neither yet knew how to overcome. Daniel worked long hours, often disappearing into the routines of his professional life, leaving Emily waiting for glimpses of him in the evenings. And Emily herself carried hesitations, memories of the past that whispered warnings, fears that rushing toward something unknown might bring pain instead of joy. One evening, as they walked through the park under the soft glow of streetlights, Daniel paused and looked at her. "You know," he said gently, "I think sometimes we hold on to the past too tightly. It makes us afraid to embrace what's in front of us." Emily nodded slowly. It's hard not to think about what could go wrong," she admitted. "But with you, I don't know, it feels different. Safe in a way I didn't know I could feel." He smiled softly, brushing a leaf from her coat. "Safe isn't boring. Safe is where real connection grows." And in that simple exchange, a bridge was built between them. The walls they had carefully constructed around their hearts began to feel a little less daunting. Yet even as they laughed at shared stories and walked side by side, the echoes of past disappointments lingered, tiny reminders that life wasn't always simple. that the world could be unpredictable, and that longing could be both sweet and painful. Emily thought about the letters she had never sent, the dreams she had quietly shelved, and the cautious hope that perhaps, for the first time in years, someone might truly understand her. Daniel, walking beside her, seemed to carry a similar quiet optimism, the kind that didn't demand certainty but welcomed possibility. As they reached the edge of the park, the evening air crisp and fragrant with fallen leaves, Daniel turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "I'm glad we met, Emily," he said softly, "even if it was by chance." Emily's heart fluttered at the simplicity of his words. "Me too," she whispered. The first snowfall of the season came quietly, dusting the city streets with a soft layer of white. Emily pulled her coat tighter around her and wrapped her scarf with extra care, feeling the crisp winter air sting her cheeks. It had been weeks since she had last seen Daniel, and though their separation had been brief, it felt longer than she expected. Life had a way of crowding in work demands, family matters, and the small responsibilities that never seemed to pause. She wandered through the quiet park, the paths now lined with icy leaves, thinking about the fleeting moments she had shared with him. Those walks, the conversations, and the laughter, they lingered in her memory like the warmth of a candle against the cold. But lately, there had been silence. Daniel's calls had grown less frequent, his messages briefer, and the small spark she had felt between them seemed to hover in the background, uncertain and fragile. Emily's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden commotion near the park's fountain. Children were chasing one another, their laughter echoing against the brick buildings, while a few people attempted to keep pace with energetic dogs. Amid the activity, a familiar figure emerged. Daniel. He was kneeling by the fountain, laughing softly as he tried to untangle a small dog that had slipped its leash. Emily paused, her heart skipping a beat. She hadn't expected to see him here. Not today, not now. And yet, as their eyes met across the park, the world seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, he simply stared, both unsure whether to step forward or retreat. Then Daniel stood, brushing his gloves against his coat, and gave her a small, hesitant smile. "Emily," he said, his voice carrying that familiar, calm warmth. "I didn't expect to run into you here." Emily returned the smile, though her heart raced. "I could say the same," she admitted. "It's been a while." A quiet tension settled between them, not uncomfortable, but charged with unspoken emotions. Weeks apart had given them time to reflect, and now, standing so close, the memories of their shared moments rushed forward. The warmth of their conversations, the quiet understanding they had discovered in each other, and the simple joy of being present in one another's company, everything they had shared felt suddenly immediate and urgent. Daniel hesitated, as though weighing his next words. I've thought about you," he confessed softly. "More than I expected. I guess I wasn't sure if I should reach out or if you even wanted to." Emily felt a gentle ache in her chest. She had thought of him too often, remembering the careful attentiveness in his gaze and the way he seemed to understand her without needing explanations. "I thought about you too," she admitted. "A lot. Sometimes I wondered if I should just let it go, but I couldn't." The words hung in the cold winter air between them, tender and raw, unguarded yet safe. The distance of the past weeks suddenly seemed insignificant, replaced by the intensity of the present moment. Emily noticed the faint blush on Daniel's cheeks and the way his eyes softened when he looked at her. She realized that the spark they had shared was not gone yet, had only been waiting quietly for the right moment to resurface. A gust of wind swirled around them, lifting fallen leaves and scattering a few flakes of snow. Daniel laughed softly, shaking his head. "I guess fate has a way of pushing us together, even when we're not paying attention," he said. Brushing a stray snowflake from his coat, Emily smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in weeks. "Or maybe it just knows what we need before we do," she said. They walked together along the park's icy paths, sharing stories of the weeks they had spent apart, laughing at minor frustrations and small victories. Every word, every glance Every quiet pause between them built a sense of familiarity and closeness that neither could deny. And yet, beneath the laughter, a gentle tension lingered, a question of what had kept them apart in the first place, and whether those obstacles might still exist. At the edge of the park, Daniel stopped and looked at her seriously, his breath visible in the cold air. "Emily, I don't want to let time slip by without telling you how I feel," he said, his voice steady but soft. "I've been hesitant, worried about the past, about what it means. But I realize now that I can't ignore it anymore. You matter to me more than I thought possible." Emily's heart swelled. She wanted to tell him the same thing, to explain the nights she had spent thinking about him, the quiet longing she had tucked into her chest. "Daniel," she said softly, "I felt the same way. I was scared maybe, but not of you. Just of losing something before it had a chance to grow. But I can't deny it anymore either." For a long moment, they simply stood together, the park around them alive with the quiet bustle of winter, yet somehow feeling suspended in time. The spark between them, once tentative and fragile, now shone brightly, illuminated by the honesty they had shared and the gentle unfolding of their hearts as they continued their walk. Side by side, Emily realized that life had a way of testing patience and resilience, of creating obstacles not to keep people apart, but to make them appreciate the connection when it finally arrives. She felt a renewed sense of hope, a quiet certainty that, despite the distance of the past weeks, the bond between them had grown stronger, more real, and ready to face whatever might come next. And in that moment, with snow falling softly around them and the city lights reflecting off icy streets, Emily and Daniel discovered that sometimes the present holds its own kind of magic. A chance encounter, a small twist of fate, had reignited feelings they thought had been dormant, reminding them both that true connection cannot be denied, only waits for the right moment to bloom. After that winter afternoon in the park, Emily found herself thinking about Daniel constantly, not in a fleeting or distracting way, but in the quiet, persistent way that memories of someone meaningful can settle into your mind, shaping your thoughts and filling the small spaces of your day. She replayed their conversations, the laughter they had shared, and the soft moments of connection that neither of them had labeled. Yet both had felt deeply. Even though they had reconnected, something remained unspoken. There was a hesitation in Daniel's eyes, a careful restraint in the way he moved around her, as if he were protecting some fragile truth from spilling out. And Emily, for her part, felt a similar restraint of fear that speaking too freely might shatter the delicate bond they were forming. They had both been touched by the past, by disappointments and uncertainties, and neither wanted to risk the fragile hope they now shared. One evening, Emily sat in her apartment, gazing out at the city lights that twinkled through the frost-coated windows. The snow had stopped, leaving streets glimmering under the lamplight, and she felt a quiet ache of longing in her chest. She thought about Daniel's smile, the way his eyes seemed to understand her without words, and the gentle reassurance that had come with each shared moment. She wanted to tell him how much he meant to her, to speak the truths she had kept tucked inside for so long. But words seemed insufficient, and silence felt safer. Meanwhile, Daniel walked home along a familiar route, the evening air cold against his face. He replayed the moments he had spent with Emily over the past weeks, the way her laughter had warmed even the grayest of days, the soft curiosity in her eyes when she listened to his stories, and the quiet comfort of simply being near her. Yet he, too, held back. He feared that revealing too much of his heart might rush what was unfolding, might disturb the fragile balance they had carefully built. And so he kept his emotions in check, speaking in measured tones, offering gestures of thoughtfulness without fully revealing the depth of his longing. Fate, however, seemed unwilling to let their unspoken truths remain hidden. A week later, they found themselves at the same small bookstore where they had first wandered together during a light rain. The air was filled with the warm scent of old pages and polished wood, a quiet refuge from the bustle of the city outside. Emily wandered the aisles slowly, running her fingers along the spines of books as if hoping to find a story that could mirror her own. Daniel appeared a few steps behind her, holding a worn copy of a poetry collection she had mentioned in passing weeks before. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. The distance between them felt heavy, charged with everything they had yet to say. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "I found this and thought of you," he said, holding out the book. His hand trembled slightly, betraying the calm he tried to project. Emily took the book, her fingers brushing his, and a shiver ran up her spine, not from the cold, but from the quiet intimacy of the gesture. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice catching in a way that revealed more than words could convey. They wandered the aisles together, side by side but not touching, speaking in soft tones. Every glance carried the weight of unexpressed emotions. They talked about poetry and art, favorite novels, and memories of childhood. But beneath the conversation flowed a deeper current to yearning. Neither could yet name aloud. Emily thought about the moments when she had almost told him, when the longing had risen so strongly it hurt to hold back. She recalled the nights she had replayed their shared laughter in her mind, wishing she could simply tell him that he mattered more than anyone she had known in years. And Daniel, walking beside her, wrestled with the same feelings. He had rehearsed words he had never spoken, confessions that seemed too fragile for the daylight, yet too important too. The first rays of spring sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the small cafe where Emily and Daniel had agreed to meet. Outside, the city buzzed with the familiar rhythms of morning traffic and hurried pedestrians. But inside, the world seemed quieter, softer, as though it existed just for them. Emily arrived early, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, feeling a flutter of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. Daniel walked in a few minutes later, his coat still damp from the morning drizzle. The sight of him sent a wave of emotions rushing through Emily: relief, longing, and a tender excitement that was almost dizzying. He approached her table with that gentle smile she had grown to recognize, one that spoke of care, thoughtfulness, and the quiet courage to face what had been left unspoken. "Good morning," he said softly, sliding into the seat across from her. "I hope I'm not keeping you waiting." Emily shook her head, her smile trembling slightly. "Not at all," she replied. Her voice carried the weight of everything she had been holding inside weeks of reflection, longing, and small moments of hope. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, listening to the faint hum of conversations around them. Then Daniel spoke, his tone low and careful, as if choosing words from a place of vulnerability. "Emily, there's something I need to say. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I can't let it go unspoken anymore." Her heart skipped. She knew this moment was coming, yet hearing the words aloud made it feel both fragile and profound. "What is it?" she asked, leaning forward slightly, her hands clasped around her cup. Daniel took a deep breath, his eyes searching hers. "I've been holding back because I was afraid of getting hurt, afraid of losing you before we even really had a chance. But keeping my feelings inside has only made me realize how much I care about you, how much you mean to me." Emily felt a rush of emotion she couldn't contain. Relief, joy, and a tender ache all mingled together. She had waited for this, for someone to truly see her, to understand the quiet spaces of her heart. And now, standing on the edge of vulnerability herself, she knew she had to speak her own truth. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest, "I've felt the same way. I've been too afraid of losing what we've started, afraid of making the wrong move. But I can't deny it any longer. You mattered to me more than I've been willing to admit." A silence fell between them, not uncomfortable, but profound. The unspoken weight of weeks of longing, hesitation, and reflection lifted, leaving them with a raw, open space that felt sacred. Emily watched as Daniel's expression softened, the tension in his shoulders easing, and she realized that in speaking her truth, she had given him the same courage to fully embrace what they shared. "I never wanted to rush you," he said, reaching for her hand across the table. "But I also don't want to wait any longer. I don't want another day to pass without you knowing how I feel." You've changed the way I see the world, Emily, and I can't imagine it without you in it." Her heart swelled with a quiet joy. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the depth of emotion that had remained hidden for too long. "You've changed my world too," she whispered, "in ways I didn't even realize I needed. I feel lighter, happier, more alive when I'm with you." The words hung between them, gentle and true, yet heavy with meaning. It was as if the entire universe had paused to witness the moment two hearts finally recognized each other without reservation. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the quiet miracle unfolding in the small cafe. Daniel smiled, a mixture of relief and happiness in his eyes. "Then, maybe we don't need to hold back anymore," he said softly. "We can start being honest with each other, fully honest, and see where it takes us." Emily's fingers brushed against his, the warmth of his hand grounding her in the reality of the moment. "Yes," she said, a gentle determination in her voice. "No more holding back. We'll face it together, whatever comes." They sat there for a long moment, hands intertwined, hearts open. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just the quiet, profound truth of two people who had finally spoken the words that had been echoing in their hearts for weeks. It was a turning point, not because it changed the world around them, but because it changed the world within them. The cafe around them seemed softer somehow, the sunlight warmer, the hum of life gentler. And in that quiet intimacy, Emily and Daniel discovered the power of honesty, courage, and of letting the heart speak freely. The barriers that had held them back, hesitation, fear, uncertainty, had been replaced by a shared promise to honor the connection they had found and to nurture it with care, patience, and love as they finally rose to leave. Stepping out into the soft drizzle of spring rain, neither could ignore the feeling that something beautiful was beginning, something rare and precious, born not just from chance, but from the courage to speak the truth. And though the future remained unwritten, both of them knew that this turning point had set the course for a story that was theirs to write. Together, spring had fully arrived, painting the city in soft greens and the gentle bloom of early flowers. Emily walked down the familiar tree-lined street toward the park. The sun warm on her face and the faint scent of blossoms carried on the breeze. Today felt different, lighter, brighter, as if the world itself had shifted in the quiet moments she and Daniel had shared over the past weeks. She spotted him almost immediately, leaning against the railing of the small bridge overlooking the fountain, his posture relaxed but thoughtful. When their eyes met, a smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that spoke of comfort, trust, and quiet joy. Emily felt a flutter of warmth in her chest, a reminder of how far they had come from tentative introductions and unspoken longing to this present moment, where honesty and emotion had bridged the space between them. "Hi," Daniel said softly, walking toward her. His voice carried the gentle familiarity that had come to mean so much to Emily. "Hi," she replied, matching his calm tone, though her heart beat a little faster. They walked together along the winding paths of the park, the world around them alive with the laughter of children and the songs of birds returning after winter. Emily noticed how natural it felt to be beside him, how easily their conversation flowed, filled with shared observations, quiet jokes, and reflections of days past. "I've been thinking," Daniel said after a pause, "about how unexpected all of this has been, and yet it feels like it was meant to happen in its own time." Emily nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "It does," she admitted. "Every hesitation, every pause, it led us here. Maybe it was the waiting that made us realize how much it mattered." They stopped near a bench under the shade of an old oak tree. Daniel sat first, patting the spot beside him, and Emily joined him. They didn't need to speak immediately. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the sense of something both fragile and strong, the culmination of the trust and emotions they had slowly shared. After a moment, Daniel turned to her, his expression serious but tender. "Emily, I want to promise you something," he said. "I don't know what the future will hold, but I do know that I want to face it with you. I don't want to go back to the days of uncertainty, holding back, or wondering, what if? I want honesty, I want care, and I want to build something that lasts with you." Emily's chest swelled with emotion. She felt the truth of his words resonate deep inside her, reflecting her own thoughts and feelings. "Daniel," she whispered, "I want the same. I want to be open, to trust, to share, and to grow together. I don't have all the answers either, but I know I want to face whatever comes with you." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves above, carrying with it the quiet promise of new beginnings. They held each other's gaze, each recognizing the depth of the bond that had grown from shared moments of vulnerability, hope, and understanding. It wasn't a perfect story, it never would be, but it was theirs, Kay, and that made it beautiful. For the first time in months, Emily felt completely at peace. She realized that life's uncertainties, the missed opportunities, the moments of waiting had all led to a connection richer than she could have imagined. And Daniel, seeing the quiet strength in her eyes, felt a sense of certainty he had longed for, a certainty that came not from grand gestures, but from the steady, mutual understanding of two hearts learning to trust each other as they walked hand in hand toward the fountain. The sun casting golden light across the water, Emily reflected on how far they had come. There had been hesitation, doubt, and unspoken feelings. Yet those very struggles had made the bond stronger, teaching them patience, empathy, and the power of honesty. The moments of longing and quiet reflection had not been wasted. They had been preparation for this, for the emotional clarity and connection they now shared. They paused at the fountain, watching the water sparkle in the sunlight. Daniel smiled, a gentle expression full of warmth and certainty. "You know," he said softly, "I think this is the beginning of something wonderful. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real, and it's ours." Emily nodded, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "Real and ours," she repeated. "I like that. It feels right." The park seemed to embrace them, every sound and sight a quiet witness to the promise they had made. The air was filled with the light fragrance of flowers, the distant laughter of passers-by, and TR,